We're here today to speak with one of the contributors to our new book, How to Heal Our Divides. I'm here with Vanessa Ryerse. Vanessa is an ordained pastor and working artist in Northwest Arkansas. Vanessa and her husband, Rob, pastor Vintage Fellowship in Fayetteville, which they planted over a decade ago. Together, they have 4 children, biological and adoptive, ranging from college to preschool. In 2018, Rob ran for U.S. Congress, and Vanessa completed a room-sized mosaic installation in the Conrad Hilton of Washington, D.C. So I want to hear more about that in a moment. Their congressional run was documented in a film called True Believer by Sarah Colt Productions. Vanessa also sells into Etsy shops, one for vintage home decor called the Classic Butterfly, and another for broken china mosaic art, the Mosaic Butterfly. But the real reason Vanessa is here with us today is because she participated in an effort called Vote Common Good and wrote about it in our new book. So Vanessa, it's really wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you participating in this project.
I'll start off by disseminating the hardest question, and that is how to pronounce our name. And it's Ryerse. My name is
Ryerse. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Nobody gets it right. So that's okay.
Good. So maybe before we get into Vote Common Good, you could tell us a little bit more about your background.
Oh, sure. So I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, country kid, was in private Christian school, very fundamentalist church, attended that my whole growing up years, kindergarten through 12th grade. Then went off to Bible college because what else are you going to do? That's what you're prepared for. So went off and got an English ed degree and also got married, went straight into ministry. The week after we got married, we started at our first church. We were in traditional churches for 10 years, all over the place, New York City, Boston, rural Michigan. And then we turned 30 and realized that we were fighting over whether we were going to wear a tie to Sunday evening service and if we had to play the organ for the songs. And that was not what we had signed up for. We thought we were training to change the world. And so we decided we needed to start a church that we would go to even if they didn't pay us. So we did that in, I think, 2005. We moved to Northwest Arkansas. We were looking for a place that was growing, was open to new ideas, because we really had to leave our past, our network, our denomination. We had been part of these very fundamentalist churches for that time, and we just had undergone a faith shift. We just didn't fit there anymore. The questions we were asking, we just didn't fit there anymore. So we started from scratch. We started Vintage Fellowship from scratch. We had no backers or support. Well,
wow.
Our background, they said, don't send us your newsletters. We don't want to know how you're doing. Like we're not invested in your success. We don't want this to work out for you. And most church plants fail. They fail like restaurants. I think it's like 86% of church plants fail. And somehow or another, we are still kicking. About 5 years ago, I kind of realized for me personally that I needed to speak up. We're part of this church that's really creative and believes in equality, and I was still playing really small, and I realized that I needed to sort of step up. And so through the process of thinking it through, we decided that I should go through the ordination process, and that would give our church a chance to sort of explore that and have that experience. And so I spent a year exploring beliefs and writing and kind of, thinking about where I was and being able to express that. And then the church went through a process of sort of questioning and, grilling me, which was fun and exciting and a great experience. And so they ordained me about, I guess it was 4 years ago. And so just getting the chance to sort of grow and think into that space as a woman. And our church is what we would call sort of post-denominational and progressive evangelical. So those are really directions that we're coming from that sort of help you to figure out where we are on the map. So then over the years, I've just explored my creativity, always was interested in old things. And one year my husband got me a pair of tile nippers so that I could cut up old plates. I was selling on eBay, back in the day when that first started, and was the power seller and did all of that. Sold old things, the whole time that we were, starting the church, and the kids were small, and it was a way for me to be able to give some support to the family. And when I figured out how I could cut plates and have some control over that, then I started to be able to create what I was envisioning and be able to create the patterns and the look and the style that I was after. And I just sort of went to town on that. And that created this whole other, really a business and also an identity as an artist, because I was able to take these old things and recreate them. There's so much metaphor involved with that. And people love the look of that. They really respond to seeing something broken, being used in a new way. I mean, everybody seems to respond to it. And I do these craft shows, and these guys would come through, tagging along with their wives, these craft shows, and you could see them instantly like hone in on, oh, I can see how you did that. Oh, you use like wet saws and power tools and grout and cement. This is like, it's really such a fun thing to see people respond to that. So,
so tell us about this room size installation.
Yeah.
So that sounds
probably next in the story. I'm trying to think like how, I guess they found me on Etsy, maybe. It was a company that had already started to work. I mean, it's one of those gigantic projects that you don't really understand like how it gets started, but a designer is working for the architect and the whole thing. So they kept looking for somebody who was doing what I do, and they found me, and I had to bid on the project. They'd been looking for somebody for 2 years, and it was just a good fit. And I thought about saying no. It's 25 feet by 7 feet. And I just had I had never worked on that.
That's huge.
Yeah. I mean, and the logistics of how do you move that, and how do you get that from here to there, and how do you hang it on a wall that doesn't even exist yet? I mean, this hotel was being built.
Okay.
And so it was a 2-year process of sort of figuring all of that out. But then once I kind of got started and decided, yes, I am the right person for this project, then it was just, it's very meditative work. I worked on these large 4x4 panels and just slowly worked through those, one by one. It ended up being 14 panels. And then we were able to ship it to the place. And then I went and helped them install it. And it's entirely made of blue and white china, especially what's called blue willow. And everybody has blue willow. Their grandma has it. It's the longest running china pattern that's ever been made. Every company makes it. You can buy a set on, Walmart.com. And it's just, I mean, everybody has it. It's like the blue jeans of dishes. And it was originally created as a marketing ploy. The English were trying to break into the Asian porcelain trade. And so they created these, they're just transfers. They're just a pattern that they lay on the dishes that they were making. And they created this whole story about the 2 lovers, and there's birds, and they couldn't be together. And I mean, it's all a marketing ploy. It's not, people love the story. They love the feel of it. They respond to, everybody eats off of dishes. There's a human thing. There's a nostalgia thing. And then there's the broken thing where people are responding to that desire to see things brought back together and restored. And so, the entire piece is, just entirely made of this blue and white china. There are teapots and cups and saucers and plates, and it just covers this whole gigantic wall. And so the Conrad Hilton is the hotel in Washington, D.C., and it's part of the restaurant, the Estuary. And this is their private meeting room, and they've named it after the piece. It's the Blue Willow Room. So,
that's cool. How neat is that?
Yeah.
So tell us about Vote Common Good. Why did that effort get started? How did you get involved in it?
Sure. So Vote Common Good was an idea that hatched I believe, and I wasn't there at the time, but I believe it was at Mountain Film Fest. And my friend Doug Paget was there with some other friends. And it's just, Mountain Film Fest is a, a great place to sort of hatch creativity and interact with documentaries and all kinds of films that are being released. And so Doug and his friends got to talking about what could we do to address this thing that has happened with the Trump presidency, and looking at especially evangelical voters, that 81% of them had voted for Trump. And there are a lot of faith people, myself included, who don't feel like that kind of Christianity represents us, and that we're like, we don't show up in that. That doesn't look like us. But that was our past, and those were the people that we were connected to. And so it became this question of, are there other people who would like to have the freedom to kind of break out of this mold, that if you're Christian, you're Republican and you vote this way. And so it was sort of an idea that kind of got started. And I believe it was maybe the 2018 elections that they went out on a bus tour all over the country to go after the congressional seats, to try to flip those those seats. And so my husband actually went out with that group. And so in 2016, when Trump was elected, my husband and I were horrified, like a lot of people. And we were trying to figure out what we could do. And I heard a podcast that sparked my imagination about a group called Brand New Congress. And so that was how my husband got involved, and he ran for Congress in 2018. He did not win, as most congressional candidates don't their first time around. It's incredibly difficult. We learned a lot about the process and how it works and the funding behind it, and a lot of the forces that are at play that you don't ever see. And so with that knowledge, he was really ideal to go out with the first batch of that first kind of take at Vote Common Good. He had a lot of connections with candidates at that point. And so he became the political director of this kind of fledgling group. And the idea was to go out and sort of give people an opportunity to just, question, maybe voting reflexively Republican, just because that's what we've always done, is not what's best for everyone. Maybe that is not best for the thriving of all people. That instead of thinking in terms of, just trying to win, how do we get everybody to win? What is going to contribute to the thriving of all of these people? So that was 2018. They went out, they did 3 months, I think, on that tour. And they began to realize, oh, there's something here. This has some footing. We have things to say and things to explore and questions to ask, and representation to offer, that, here's what this could look like if we were to bring, faith, hope, and love into politics. So how I got on to the bus was sort of interesting. I didn't really consider myself, about political, I was interested in politics because Rob was interested in politics. And it felt sort of like, learning alongside of him while I watch football, because he loves football. But it wasn't my thing per se. I didn't feel knowledgeable enough. Engaged. I, tried to keep track of how things happen and whatnot, but I just didn't feel like I belonged in that space. Until I think it was 2018, maybe 2019, the shootings in El Paso, the shooting that happened in El Paso in the Walmart there. And that became a very personal touchstone for me because it was targeted to the Latinx community there. El Paso is a really interesting city because it's on the border, and for their entire existence, they have never thought of themselves as us and them. They have always been a community that just happens to have a border that runs through it. And so their families are on both sides. They have always coexisted. And there's a sweetness to their existence. And so that's one of the reasons why that shooting was so insidious. That shooter drove 10 hours to go there to target their health and their goodness to one another. But for me personally, I happened to be shopping in Walmart that day with my family in Northwest Arkansas where we live. But then when those details started to come out, I started to take it very personally because our daughter, our third kid, is adopted, and she's a Latina. And I just, when you adopt, it's so easy to think, well, I mean, she's just like us. We've had her all this time, but the world doesn't see her that way. They see her as brown. They see her as Hispanic. They see her as Latin. And so my protection of her does not extend outside of this house if I'm not with her. And I just began to realize that I owed her. I owed her protection. I owed putting myself on the line for her. And the only thing I had really was story. Forgive me.
Yeah, no problem. It's so easy to think that the only way to make a dent is if you have power, if you have influence, if you have money, especially in the political realm. It's so easy to sort of get sucked into that power struggle. And you look around and it's white guys kind of running things. And it's easy to feel really powerless in the face of that. So how did you get involved in Vote Common Good, based on that need?
Yeah, so that story, it hung over me. And so I ended up going to El Paso for an event that Vote Common Good put together. They called it a border experience, and it gave people the opportunity to go and see these places and these events, like this, this space for themselves. So we were able to speak to organizers on the ground, the people that are doing the work there. It gave us the opportunity to see a detention center and the Walmart where the shooting was, just the culture there. And when I was able to see that in person, I became very empowered. It's one thing to go, Facebook Live and want to talk about my opinions, whatever. But when you've actually gone there and you have that face-to-face experience, then you can start, that has a little bit more weight. So I just started talking, just started exploring and learning for myself. And so Rob went out on the tour. The plan was for him to go out for the 2019 tour. He was going to go out pretty much the whole year with the tour. I was going to stay home and hold things together. And of course, they had to stop because of the pandemic. And so they kept doing online events and trying to overcome those barriers to connection. But then
a lot of folks probably don't know what those tours look like. Could you describe what those?
Sure. Yeah. So the tour, their plan was to go to all 50 states over the course of 2019 and 2020, and to reach as many congressional spaces as they could, and to try to sort of shave off the difference. If you could make a little bit of a difference in the faith voters, that's all they had to do was move just a small percentage of voters from one side to the other to be able to make a difference in those elections, and especially the presidential election. And so the events are sort of like a camp meeting, a church camp kind of service. There's music and poetry, and there's some humor and storytelling and kind of a talk, and then an opportunity to invite people to get involved however they can. Some people ended up joining the tour. Some people just became local kind of activists in their own space and sort of inviting people into this vote common good conversation. There were opportunities for people to see that you could do this differently, and to encourage them to make a vote or to make a promise that they would vote with faith, hope, and love guiding their choices. So so they just went all over the country. I think they did maybe 33 events. They started on, Super Tuesday, and they just, from town to town to town, just telling stories and giving these opportunities, this in-person kind of experience. And then when the pandemic happened, and they kind of had to rethink that. And then in the fall, they felt like we could go out and do socially distanced outdoor events. Everything was outside, masks and lots of hand sanitizer, and just in these kind of open air spaces, which that ended up being really interesting. Because so often these events would have happened maybe in churches or meeting spaces that might have limited people, but when you came to an outdoor event, anybody could come. They didn't feel limited in that way. And so that was really interesting. So my husband went back out on the tour in September, and they kept talking about me coming out and being part of it in some way. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I would contribute to that exactly. But I began to realize that we needed, as a couple, we had slipped into something very archaic that didn't match with who we were. And so I told my husband, we're missing some equality here. You are out doing, the superhero thing, and I am home doing the June Cleaver thing. And I'm not sure that's the best fit. And so he said, all right, you're right. We need to live according to our values. You're right. You should go out on the tour. And okay, I'll try it. I'll go out and tell this story about, how as a mother, I am passionately motivated to speak for the protection of all kinds of people. I'll go out for, a week or two. I can be, I can be a little spice. I'm not, an ingredient. I'll just add a little flavor. And so, that's that. I went out for 2 weeks, and had this opportunity to tell this story face to face to these beautiful people that came to these events. And like every pilgrimage or missions trip or, whatever you would call it, it was transformative for me. And, you can't measure exactly what you did, but that it changed you. Came home for another 2 weeks, and the guys on the tour called Rob and said, we love you. We know your story is great, but we need Vanessa to come back, which just meant the world to me. And so I was able to go back out and stay on until the tour came to the end. So we were able to convince enough faith voters to switch in very key congressional districts to flip and vote for Joe Biden and to get him elected. We were able to do polling afterwards that showed that those exact places that we went were very key demographics. They were places that were able to change from how they had voted in the past and how they had voted this time around. We were able to reach those faith voters who were deeply uncomfortable with the rhetoric of the Trump presidency.
It's an amazing accomplishment, and incredibly important.
And certainly we weren't the only ones. Certainly there were other groups that were working hard and speaking into their spaces and, doing what they knew how to do well. But to be able to look at those districts and say, those were places that we went and really put ourselves out there and really were able to connect. And it did make a difference. So
this phenomenon of, a certain set of people being so entrenched, in the way that they've voted and the way that they've believed or what have you, has shown to be a very difficult thing to overcome. So what do you think has been the key ingredients in allowing the Vote Common Good effort to make those switches?
I imagine they're very deeply personal reasons. Just like for me, to make that move, and it's really identity. Your identity as I'm a Republican. I voted Republican my whole life. This is what my family does. This is who I am. It's being able to sort of disrupt that picture of your identity and to believe and model that you could be something else, that you can be a deeply committed follower of Jesus. You can be a deeply religious person and you can vote differently than you were taught to vote.
So you think it's the role modeling of that people needed to see existence proofs, so to speak?
I think role modeling is huge. I do. I think it's, when somebody is willing to go first and say, here's what it looks like. Here's how you can be, you can have integrity. You can keep believing strongly. And, one of the biggest questions, of course, is the abortion issue. Of course, it's one of the hardest things to bridge. And to be able to say, yes, we want all life to thrive. We cannot ignore all of these other people in the pursuit of this thriving or this, the unborn. You can't ignore all of these other people who are suffering in elevating that as the only issue. And being able to sort of flatten that high point for so many people, because that's the thing that so many people, Catholic and evangelical voters, that they hinge on that. And being able to say, actually, there's a way we could do this that would reduce abortions and these other people would also be able to thrive and be safe.
Yeah,
we could do both. It's a win-win.
Yeah. So, since the 2020 election has been over for a few months now, how has Vote Common Good shifted its focus and what kind of activities and things are going on now?
So Vote Common Good still has so much work to do. If January 6th did not teach us anything, it spoke loud and clear that Vote Common Good has lots to do. Because the other issue that has cropped up in these faith spaces is this Christian nationalism. And so Vote Common Good is exploring how to help pastors to speak to that and how to let them know, especially, I think it's really hard for these pastors and leaders to know what they're allowed to do. They have this sort of image in their head. Well, I'm not allowed to speak about politics from the pulpit. I'm not allowed to I don't, we'll lose our tax exempt status. There's a certain, that's a no, right? No. And so like helping faith leaders to know what you're allowed to do and what you can do, how you can speak to this, why your people are so attracted to this, to these baseless conspiracy theories, and how they feel connected, and it helps how they're like, they're feeling connected to a community, not in a good way. And here are some ways that you could address that. So that's one of the things they're doing. They're doing training for candidates to be able to speak to possible voters, because historically Democratic candidates are really not great at speaking to faith. They memorize John 3:16 in the car on the way to an event and hope that works, but they're not comfortable speaking to that space. And so Vote Common Good is like offering some training to help them to be able to speak more comfortably and more authentically. They really have a lot in common, but they don't know how to speak that language. And so Vote Common Good is giving them some tools to be able to connect with voters. I think that's really valuable. So training pastors, training candidates, putting out lots of podcasts of lots of information for people to interact with as they're thinking. What has happened is people they'll say they feel politically homeless. Essentially, they don't know where they fit anymore. The Republican Party doesn't represent them. They don't feel like Democrats. They don't know where they belong. And so there's just a lot of talking and processing about, again, identity. Like, okay, where do I fit? Who represents me? Am I allowed to think like this? Does this match with who I am? And so, a lot of information, making a lot of information available to those people.
So if people want to get involved in Vote Common Good, besides just going to look at the website, what are the different ways that they can participate?
So definitely tapping into podcasts would be a great way to sort of get acquainted with the people in the network. And then seeing how they are connected to the rest of they're all over the country. Vote Common Good is everywhere. So being able to participate in something local, there'll definitely be an event coming your way. I'm sure that bus is going to run again.
Is there a specific plan for that? I mean, yet or too
early? The dreams are in place. And obviously, funding is a, if you want to participate by funding and, signing up for the newsletter and kind of seeing what's happening next. It's nice because it's a light-footed, when you're a young organization, you can be really light-footed and you can really address like what needs to happen. You don't have to worry about, we never did it that way before, So there's always going to be creative responses. I mean, the whole organization, one of the things that runs through it is creativity. And also there's a lightness to it. I think that's one of my most favorite things about Vote Common Good is there is a lightness to it. It's so easy in the realm of politics and faith, to get so sincere that it's a little cheesy, and it can get a little heavy-handed and make people just feel worse. And there's a lot of humor and a lot of just a holding things gently that happens. It's one of the values at Vote Common Good that I think is so attractive. It's fun. It's fun. And we desperately need some.
I can really imagine that those events were really fantastic.
Yes. I mean, it's fun. And gosh knows we need that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Vanessa, I really appreciate you sharing your stories and sharing the Vote Common Good story and participating in how we heal our divides. I think, you guys are really onto something. It's a very important effort. It obviously accomplished a lot already, but as you said, there's a lot to go. So thank you for all your dedicated work on that and for sharing it with everyone.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.